Hello, everyone. If any of you are wondering why our society seems to be going insane, well, I would call it behavioral sync. John B. Calhoun coined that term in the 50s when doing experiments with rats and mice. Just domesticating those animals, even though he created utopias for them to live in, resulted in a complete collapse of every single colony, meaning they all died. But first, they went insane. So, where did things go wrong? Well, most people probably don't want to face the truth that we are hunter gatherers. And the only thing that's changed in thousands of years is technology, civilization. Society has become more complex. Populations have become much more dense. And what I've noticed in my travels is that the denser the population of a city, the more homelessness, the more crime, so you could say the problem is population density. As we develop technologies to prevent uh, infant mortality, mothers dying in childbirth, as we cure diseases, that this is what caused humanity to go insane. We're not meant to live in a utopia. I can't help but think of the Matrix movie. That the first Matrix was created as a utopia, but the colony collapsed. I think we're seeing a lot of the same psychopathology in our society that John B. Calhoun saw in the rats of NIMH experiments. He saw rats, mice who refused to compete with the aggressive males for mates. He called them the beautiful ones or the immaculate ones because they had no battle scars and they just preened themselves all day. In other words, they were obsessed with their appearance, very OCD. They refused to mate. We could call these incels. Involuntarily celibate. Others were like zombies. They would move very slowly around the perimeter of the environment. Absolutely strange behavior. And when I look at drug addicts, heroin addicts in the park, I can't help but think maybe these are the somnambulists in our society, our domesticated colony. I think that our society in the United States of America has achieved a complete collapse of mental health. When we look at the UNICEF report card, which is the United Nations survey of emotional well-being of children in the wealthiest 39 countries, the United States is at the bottom of the list. And I think we should take this very seriously. And we wonder why we have a completely insane president who's an embarrassment to the American people, who is frightening to the rest of the world, potentially the next Hitler. And there are actually people in our society who are behind him. If you look at all the institutions of our society, it is nothing but narcissism. An obsession with status. Everyone wants to be a famous person on social media. Women, when selecting mates, are completely delusional. Grandiose delusions about their value in society. Entitled. Vindictive. Men are being legally raped by women in our society. But of course, they project that onto men. Bring down the patriarchy. Woke feminism. You know what this is? This is dominance by playing the victim. It's bullying. It's sadistic. None of these terms describe femininity. So this isn't feminism. It's male competition because women have not developed the feminine side of their brain because their mothers weren't present and weren't emotionally available in order for them to develop the feminine, empathic, nurturing, compassionate, loving side of the brain. And while I am all for women's rights for equality, I can see a I can see dominance, the quest for dominance. Okay, I know it when I see it, and I feel it. So this is the complete collapse of the feminine in our society. And it's no different than the Rats of Nim experiments where the females were unable to tend to their young. And that's what caused the collapse and the death of the entire colony. When we look at brain scans, we see that experienced meditators are using 3 networks in the brain all the time, even when they're not meditating. But the average person is only using 1 network, the default mode network. And this has got to be complex trauma. This is dissociation. This is a defense mechanism to guard oneself against the trauma of childhood, of being abandoned by their mothers who were at work, who were emotionally unavailable, who could not develop the right side of their brain because their mothers were not available. Postpartum depression, you see what's happening. We live in a manic left brain society. But then the mother becomes, once she has a baby, the baby activates the right side of the mother's brain, which is nothing but trauma and depression So she goes into postpartum depression. And of course, checks out of the relationship, then the child becomes autistic. That's what happens to children with emotionally unavailable caregivers. And then those women become bipolar. Well, guess what? We have a bipolar brain. She's been manic her whole life, what Winnicott called the manic defense. She's been living in her left brain in order to escape the trauma of the right brain and the lack of development in the right brain. She's been masculine. She's been butch, possessed by the animus, living in a world that has brought her up to be competitive. Language, mathematics, these are all left brain functions. Reading, writing. This is why the Egyptians didn't teach women reading and writing. Because women have their own roles to play in society. As nurturers of children. So on one hand, her right brain is nothing but trauma and pain and abandonment. And she's brought up in a left brain educational system to be a worker in a left brain corporate industrialized society that's competitive and rational and logical, and reading and writing and mathematics. And then the baby comes along and activates her right brain. Of course she's going to go into a depression. Of course she's going to then become bipolar because now she has two brains online instead of one. And the more we become civilized and domesticated, the more infantilized and narcissistic we become, we are experiencing the collapse of our society. That's my point. This video has gone on long enough. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one.